Hi guys, very welcome back to Mentour and yet another video podcast. I hope you're all great out there. For all you new joiners, as always, you're very welcome to the channel. Make sure you interact, make sure you send me the questions that you might have so that I can make this channel much better for you. Because remember, the only reason I'm doing this is for you guys. I hope you guys are enjoying it and all the information that I'm trying to give you, that you find it useful. And if you don't, then please let me know how I can make it better. I've received a lot of suggestions of things that I can do on the channel, and I'm going to start to implement them soon. I am planning on doing a video about one day in the life of an airline pilot. And unfortunately, my current airline does not allow filming on the flight deck, so I won't be able to do much things while we're moving in the flight deck. However, I might be able to do some stuff while we're on the ground and together with the paperwork and after flight and just general discussions about how the day is and how the day progresses. So that's in the pipeline, that's on the way. I am also progressing with my project when it comes to your video questions. I've received a few of them. And not too many, but a few of them anyway. And the ones that I've gotten are really great. They're really good. I'm really looking forward to answering them. So that will be coming up as well. But if you have any other suggestions of content, then just please let me know. And I will do my best to try to progress the channel and make it better for you guys. Okay, so today I have a really good podcast coming up, and it's about line training. It's partially about my own line training, but also about what you can expect when you do your own line training, what line training is, what you can expect afterwards, and so on. So I strongly suggest that you stay on to the end of the podcast, okay? Because at the end, I'm going to give you a couple of extra tips that I've found through my years of training cadets to be useful. So stay on to the end. That's my suggestion for you guys, all right? So first of all, line training. My own line training took place out of Stansted. So in the last episode that I was talking about my base training, I had just finished my base training, which meant that I could send in my paperwork and receive my type rating into my license so I could begin working. When that was done, I started receiving my roster, and you can imagine how it feels. The roster comes out every Friday in my current airline, and it was like Christmas Eve when the first roster came out, to see where I was actually going to operate. The way it works, and it worked back then and still works like that now, is that the first couple of sectors you fly with a line training captain, but also with a safety pilot. And the reason for that is that until you have proven that you can operate safely, that you can land the aircraft yourself from pretty much any altitude, you have to have a third pilot with you in the cockpit in case something will happen to the line training captain. So if the line training captain would go ill, for example, the safety pilot would be able to jump in and safely get the airplane on the ground. So we were 3 people. And I can't remember exactly what the first destination that I flew to was, but it was out of London Stansted anyway, and if I'm not mistaken, we flew down to Germany. It might have been Frankfurt Hahn, actually. That was one of my first destinations. So the roster came out on the Friday. I saw that I was going to work on the Monday. Really excited, started preparing. It was on earlies, so I got myself to the crew room very, very early. Now, here is the first tip that I want to give you guys, that you will need to be fairly early in the crew room, okay, to prepare for the flight. And the reason you will want to do that is because you want to take the time yourself to prepare all the paperwork before the captain comes and starts pulling in the papers and wanting to look at things. Because it's really important to get yourself a mental picture of how the day is going to look, how the weather is, what kind of NOTAMs are out there, what you can expect, problems to expect and things. And that takes quite a long while in the beginning. But having said that, it's also really important that you're not there 3 hours in advance. Because remember, sometimes you will be doing very long days. The days can stretch up to almost 10, 12 hours of scheduled time. And if you're there 3 hours early, it means that effectively you are working way, way longer than you're supposed to. So I would say in the beginning, be there 1.5, maybe 2 hours maximum earlier than the flight to prepare everything and to do it in your own pace. And that's what I did. And actually still to this day, after 13 years of working, I still make sure that I am there about an hour before. Minimum time that we have to be before the flight is 45 minutes. But I personally, in order for myself to feel comfortable, I'm there a little bit earlier so that I can take a cup of coffee while I'm looking through my paperwork, or if there would be a problem, I would have a couple of minutes extra to sort things out. So it's just a way of operating that suits me. Might be different for you, but I guess you are going to need some extra time as well. So I was there really early. Safety pilot turned up a little bit early, but not that much early, because remember, they've been rostered to sit on the jump seat the whole day, and they're normally very experienced, the safety pilots. So they're turning up about 45-50 minutes before departure to make sure that they can help with whatever needs to be helped. So it's basically the first officer's job to gather up all of the paperwork. So to print out all the flight plans, all the NOTAMs, all the weather, and all the significant weather charts, the high and low level charts, and making sure everything is correct. Okay. Then what you tend to do is you go through all of that. Like I've actually explained this in my video pre-flight, so have a look at that one if you want a little bit further explained. So you look through, make sure that you have everything, so that when the captain comes, you already have a picture of how the day is going to progress. When the captain comes, especially on your first day of line training, you're a bit nervous because you never know, you don't really know what to expect. But generally, line training captains are like me. They're pilots that have a bit of extra passion for flying and especially for instructing. So they are really experienced when it comes to dealing with people with low experience. So you can expect them to be very understanding. The fact that you will not be sure about everything, you won't be able to interpret the NOTAMs with the same integrity and level of knowledge as they have. So they will bring you through it, and that's what the line training captain did with me. Went through everything, had a plan for the day, and this is also where preparation becomes really crucial. Now, you can turn up on the day and try to prepare everything, but I would not recommend that. I would recommend that the day before at least, you start sitting in, I don't know what your airline's preparation material might be, but in my airline we have something called airfield briefs, so that you can go in and look at any destination that has anything that is a little bit out of the normal. I mean, if there's non-precision approaches, or short runway, or tricky terrain or something like that, there would be a little brief, so you can go in and look at the destinations that you have coming up during your day. Prepare yourself. You'll also have access to your Jeppesen or your Navtech charts. So look through what kind of approaches you can expect, because that will also give you a much better situational awareness. And I also do this, and I actually still do this. I look through the weather and NOTAMs the day before. And why do I do this? Because the NOTAMs can change, obviously. But I want to have a view, kind of an idea, before I go to bed, before I go to work, about what kind of day I can expect. Generally, the long-term TAFs, the terminal area forecast, will give you an idea of what kind of weather you can expect. So I go in, I have some app, there's loads of apps that will give you aviation weather, and I'll check what kind of weather I'm expecting. If I'm expecting thunderstorms, if there's fog, if there's good weather expected, and things like that. And depending on that, I know how much earlier I have to go in the day before. During the day I'm doing the flight. Same goes with NOTAMs. I look through the NOTAMs to see if there's any special. Maybe there's a runway closure. Maybe the ILS won't be working. I obviously recheck all the NOTAMs on the day when I get to the crew room. But having checked the NOTAMs and the weather the day before gives you a much better picture of what you can expect during the day. And that's what this job is all about, really. In order for you to be a good airline pilot, you need to have good situational awareness. You don't need to be Superman, you don't need to be Chuck Yeager, you need to have a good common sense, and you need to be able to increase your situational awareness and see threats before they become an actual incident. And you do that by preparing yourself. Good preparation is key, right? So in my line training, I was flying. The line training is set up to be for cadets with very low experience. There are a minimum of 68 sectors. A sector is a flight with a takeoff, a flight, and a landing. That's considered one sector. Minimum 68 sectors, where the sector lengths generally tend to be about 1.5 hours, means that you're looking at about 100 hours of line training. In my airline, they might be different in your coming airline, and it might be different in different parts of the world. But from a cadet point of view, I think around 68 as a minimum is probably a good idea, because you'll take at least 100 hours just to get used to the differences between flying a Diamond or a Cessna or whatever you are training on and sitting in a 737. My line training captains were great. They were all experienced and they're all a little bit different. So they will all be pushing at different parts of the operation, which is great because it gives you a broader picture of how to operate the aircraft and the SOPs. Now, back in the day, 13 years ago, our SOPs were not as stringent as they are now, which meant that there was more room to kind of fly the aircraft differently. Today, the SOPs are very, very strong and they cover almost all conceivable situations. So today it's more about knowing how to execute those SOPs. Back then it was more about handling the aircraft and finding out ways to do it yourself. I personally think it's better today because it makes it easier if you're transferring with very little hours onto the 737 to know you kind of have a rope to hold on to, which are the SOPs, and they are very, very good. At least at my airline now. They might be different in others. But line training captains, nothing to be afraid of. I am a line training captain. If you see me the way that I am doing these videos and stuff, that's what you can and should expect from your line training captains, you know. So the line training in itself, common problems that faces almost all cadets are rotations. Rotation in the 737-800 is hard because it's a very long aircraft and it's very hard to practice rotations in the simulator. So everyone that comes on into line training, they tend to either rotate way too slow because they're afraid of tail strike, or rotate way too fast because that's how they did it in the sim. So we spent quite a lot of time working on rotations initially to get those smooth and in a continuous rotation where they don't stop at what we call the dead band at 10 degrees. The dead band is when the stabilizer comes into the ground effect and the backwash from the wings, and it has a tendency then to kind of stop the rotation. So you need to gently squeeze through the dead band, not pull, but squeeze it through to get a continuous 2 to 2.5 degree rotation per second. So that's something to work on. And then of course SOPs, getting all the SOPs correct, getting the RT, ATC communication, to get that sorted as a pilot monitoring. It also takes quite a lot of time because we fly in Europe, and in Europe there's a lot of different languages and all the languages sound slightly different when they talk. Even though everyone is speaking English, there will be dialects that can be tough to understand. So that takes a lot of time during line training. And then of course, when you get further into line training, getting all the non-precision approaches with their associated briefings correct, flying the ILS and doing the descent planning is very, very hard in the 737 because it's an extremely slippery aircraft. It does not decelerate and descend good at the same time. So you have to know how many track miles you need in order to both descend and decelerate. A good kind of rule of thumb there is that you need about 3 times your altitude in track miles, plus about 1 nautical mile per each 10 knots to decelerate from down to where we talk taking flaps, which is at 200 knots. So if you're at 20,000 feet and you're at 270 knots, it means that you need about 60 miles plus about 7 miles to decelerate. And then you have to take into account if you have tailwind or headwind as well. So 67 miles should have you sorted if you're at 20,000 feet with that speed. Things like that. And you have to also, you know, during your line training, you are continuously evaluating. There are going to be differences in different weights of the aircraft, different configuration, where people are seated. All of this takes time. So those 68 sectors, generally people use more sectors than that in order to be ready for a line check. Okay. Safety pilot release is a fantastic day. That's when the line training captain feels that you're good enough to fly alone with him. My safety pilot release day was the day from hell, literally. My line training captain was kind of old school, and the way he did it was he thought it's a good idea to completely ride me for 4 sectors to check how well I deal with pressure. Obviously he didn't tell me this, but I ended up doing 4 very short sectors, about 1 hour and 10 minutes, which you will You'll notice it's short if you fly a 737. Basically hand flying them, and him screaming to me to the left to do this, do that, do this, do that. And I was sweating. I thought that he was going to yell at me for an hour during the debriefing. But what actually happened was we got on the ground and he said, very good work, Petter, very nice. Your safety pilot released. You have shown me today that you are mature enough to do that. So that was his way of doing it. It's not the way we do it today. We tend to want to build our students up, make sure that you have good confidence and feel secure in your operation before we safety pilot release anyone. But that was the way that was done back then. I was very happy because I was safety pilot release. I didn't think much of it. So then you go through your line training. You will have plateaus, what we call training plateaus. It means that your line training, your kind of learning curve can be very, very steep. And then suddenly you'll have a few days where it doesn't improve at all. It's very common. It happens more or less to everyone. Don't worry about it. Just continue working on whatever areas that need to improve, and I'm sure that you are going to push through it. So we evaluate the progress throughout. If there's any problems, then we as line training captains try to sort those problems out. It might mean that you fly with the same training captain for a couple of days in order to iron if there's landings, for example, that are problems. A lot of people have problems during the last 300 feet during approach. Because remember, you might have flown a Cessna before. The closure rate to the runway with a Cessna is completely different from a 737. So a lot of people tend to just shy away slightly from the runway because it feels like they're coming in too fast. So they just pitch back a degree or so, and they go from being nicely on 2 whites, 2 reds on the poppies to being 3 whites, going up to 4 whites. This is something that's very, very common. And it's an area that we are, sometimes can cause a little bit of extra sectors to be added on because we want to push through that barrier. When you are done, when you are up to line standard in all areas, and we as line training captains are really happy with all of your progress, that we feel that you're safe to operate the aircraft in all the criteria that we have. Remember, you won't be fully learned. You will never be fully learned, but you will be safe. Then we will recommend you for a line check. And the line check is exactly that. You will fly with the line training captain and he or she will evaluate your performance, make sure that it's safe. It's a normal day. You need to do a non-precision approach. But apart from that, it's a completely normal day. If you come down after that day and you've shown that you've done a good day, safe operation within SOPs and so on, you'll be line checked. And that means that you're now free to fly with other captains, not only line training captains, but normal line captains as well. But it doesn't mean that your training stops there, okay? It means that you're free to continue your training on your own, basically. That's how you should look at it. So you need to continue to improve. Normal line captains will not put as much effort into helping you to evolve. They will just want to have a good day. They will want to have a nice, safe, and relaxing day. So there won't be as much feedback as you used to. You might fly with captains that are non-standard, that are not doing the SOPs the way that they should be because they're paid to do them. And that's another video I want you to look at, the what if the captain is an asshole video. It's a very good video actually. It hasn't gotten much views yet, but it contains a lot of tips on how to fly with captains that are not doing what they should. So have a look at that one. But remember that you will have to continuously improve, and just because you are released out of line training doesn't mean that you need to let your guard down. You still need to improve. You still need to continue reading the books, reading your manuals, and make the most out of every day, because the next year or so you're going to continuously have that learning curve and you're going to get better and better, and your confidence will improve. But it's only if you continue to try, okay? If you slump back into the right seat thinking, that's it, done, line training finished, then you will very quickly slip into bad habits. And remember, only 3 months after your initial line check, you will have a follow-up line check, and it will be very obvious if you have fallen into that trap. So try not to. Try to keep yourself as professional as possible, and try to do that during your entire career. So, now, some really, really important notes on line training, okay? Make sure that you are well rested. I know that's easily said and done. If you're really nervous, then you might not sleep as well. There's nothing to be nervous about. You know, you've done your simulator training, you know how to fly the aircraft, and we are there to help you. So don't be nervous. Make sure that you get proper rest before you start your line training. Second of all, food. Most of our cadets forget to eat in the beginning. We have to tell them to eat something during the sectors because you're so caught up in doing everything correctly, filling out all the paperwork, being prepared for the next approach and so on, so that you forget to eat. You have to eat. You have to have something to snack on, a proper meal with you, fruit, things like that. Avoid sugars, but do have sugars with you in case you need a quick kind of sugar top. Try to eat continuously, because we do notice when people are not eating, when you come down to the fourth sector of the day, the performance just drops like a stone, and it's natural. So make sure that you eat. Also drink. Also, always have water with you. We have water available in all of our crew rooms, and I'm sure that all airlines do. Make sure that you drink proper water and avoid things like Coke and Red Bull and stuff like that. Drink water. And also, when you're not line training, when you have a couple of days off, relax. Okay? Do study a little bit, but relax, so that you're not constantly, because you're going to be doing this for about 2 months. So make sure that you get some off time and relax a little bit as well. It's really important. That's about it, really. My line training, I actually managed to do my line training on the minimum 68 sectors, and I was eventually based where I did my line training, which was in London Stansted, and I had a blast. I had a great couple of years in Stansted, got to know a lot of excellent people, and as I said in my earlier podcast, even if you don't like the base that you get, it's as good as you make it. It's like with everything in this life. If you are positive about it and you try to make it work, it will work for you. That's as easy as that. So, I don't, my line training itself, a few memories I had that I really cherish is I had one of my best friends as a safety pilot on one of the flights. And I clearly remember during part of the flight, the captain had to go to the toilet. And of course, since we already were 3 in the cockpit, the safety pilot took his place. So I was sitting there. I was 20 years old. I was sitting with one of my absolute best friends, which his name is Martin, to the left of me, and we were just sitting there looking at each other in the front of a 737-800 going, 450 knots ground speed at 37,000 feet, and thinking that this is the coolest thing in the world. And it is. This job, I'm going to have to do a podcast on that later on about how the job feels when you've done it for a couple of years. So stay tuned for that one later on. But, this job, it has some really good moments. It can have some hard moments, but it has a lot of really good moments in it as well. So for those of you who are going into the industry, I wish you all the best. And I will come with more podcasts on this subject. So stay tuned. Keep sending me your suggestions, and see you next time. Thanks.